Hello, dear students. Today I have come with another topic of mine, and this topic is very essential. Rather, it is that topic which not only the students of MA English but rather the students of undergraduates should also know. The topic is very common. Figures of speech. Figures of speech or rhetorical devices are very important as far as learning poetry is concerned. You should keep it in your mind that the beauties and the delicacies of poetry or literary art consist in the fine use of figures of speech. But before I enumerate figures of speech, let me tell you what actually are the roles of figures of speech in poetry and why do poets profusely use figures of speech. We know that language is a means of communication. Through language we use and express our ideas and thoughts and feelings. But poetry uses figurative language, poetry uses emotive language, and plain language is not always preferable within the domain of poetry. Poets talk of various things. They talk of love, they talk of death, they talk of universal human emotions, they talk about mountains, rivers, sky, earth, birth, death, and other topics of life as well. And you know that they need a kind of language, a kind of ancillary things which not only supplement their poetic device, not only supplement their linguistic device, but rather excels or advances it. Poetry is not only the use of plain language, poetry is also the use of the finest language that human mind can think of or imagine of. Rhetorical devices or figures of speech are those expressions which, in different images, different things, that make the poets capable of telling their ideas about things, what they want to say. So, these are the beauties of language, these are the ornaments of language. You know that why do we put on ornaments? Why do women put on ornaments? Women put on ornaments to enhance their beauty so that they may look attractive, they may look beautiful. Similarly, poets use figures of speech to make their expression beautiful, to make their expression effective. You know that if we say something in a very simple language, that is the language of communication, that is the language of common communication. And you know, as I.A. Richards also said, that there are two uses of languages. One is the scientific usage of language, another is the emotive use of languages. Scientific use of languages always use referential language, referential word, and poetic use of language always use emotive language, the language of heart, the language of emotion. Dear students, when we are reading poetry, novels, plays, short stories, dramas, fiction, anything that is of literary worth or merit, we here or there come across so many figures of speech. We do not normally understand what are their uses in that particular context. We just pass by. No, we have to pause and ponder over those different linguistic uses. It is also a practice in poetry. Without practice, we cannot develop the art of using figures of speech succinctly or effectively. Poetry is the language of heart. Poets do not say things directly, they say their things indirectly. Poets use images, poets use symbols, poets use metaphor, poets use simile, they use pun, they use hyperbole, they use metonymy, they use other figures of speech as well. The common figures of speech in English are known to everyone. They are simile, metaphor, metonymy, pun, oxymoron, hyperbole, hyperbaton, etc. etc. Let me tell you what is the use of the figure of speech simile. Simile is a simple figure of speech which consists in the use of or comparison of two dissimilar things with the use of conjunctions as or like. And metaphor is also a kind of simile, but metaphor is a direct simile. Metaphors do not use conjunction as and like, they directly compare two things. Dear students, you will ask me, sir, why is it necessary to compare one thing with another thing? I will explain you that to be effective in communication, to be effective in poetic communication, the poets not only want that you should read the emotion, they also want you to see what the poets themselves see, and to make their ideas more palpable, more clear, they give you images, they give you comparisons from the fields of science, from the fields of geography, from the fields of mathematics, from the fields of astronomy, from the fields of natural science, from the fields of biology, and what not. So the communication is very much effective. I come across so many similes and metaphors when I read poems, when I read fictions, and normally I pass by. But when we have studied figures of speech, we pause and ponder that yes, this is the figure of speech applied here. If somebody asks me, or if somebody asks you, sir, tell me any two figures of speech about simile and metaphor. What is simile and what is the example of simile? One example of simile. So you can say first that she is as old as the hills. She is as beautiful as morning. He is like the pillar of the estate. And what is metaphor? If you say that Kalidas is called the Shakespeare of England. Kalidas is called the Shakespeare of England, and Shakespeare is called the Kalidas of India, you can say. Okay, and not merely that, there are so many other figures of speech as well. If you ask me what is oxymoron, I will tell you that oxymoron is a figure of speech that consists in the use of two similar meaning words side by side, which consists in the placement of two similar meaning words side by side with a view to have a poetic effect. How? Milton in his Paradise Lost describes hell, and he says, there is no light but rather darkness visible. So darkness and visible, they are two palpably opposite things, palpably opposite words. But if you pause and ponder, you will find certain kind of meaning achieved through the use of and placement of these two words side by side, that is darkness and visible. Means this hell is so deep, this hell is so bottomless that there is nothing visible. What is visible is only darkness. So poet has achieved what he wanted to achieve in a very, very succinct manner, because this use of oxymoron is very essential. If I say that he is the only honest thief, honest thief. Honest means fair, having integrity, and thief is a person of low moral character who takes away somebody's things, who robs someone of something. So, why on earth the poet has used these two words simultaneously, placing them side by side? If you analyze it, it becomes all the more clearer that yes, when he thieves something, when he steals something, he also has some principle, and he adheres to his principles of stealing, he adheres to his principles of thieving, and so it becomes clear that thieves have also certain kind of principle. They also work on the chalked out or laid down unwritten codes of conduct. Not only this, there are many more examples of oxymoron which we can learn when we try deliberately to delve into the language of poetry as a workshop. We have to spare time and point out wherever such figures of speech are found, and we have to learn it deliberately. And apart from that, we should also take away time from our busy schedule and try to produce our own figures of speech. Another very important figure of speech that comes to my mind at this moment is pun. Pun is what? Pun is a play upon words, that the users of pun play upon the same word. It means that two suggestive or alternative meanings of the same word are provided for the sake of particular poetic effect. For example, if you remind yourself of George Herbert's The Gifts of God, you will come to know that there Herbert has used the word rest as a pun. How? He says, let him take the rest, but keep them with repining restlessness. So here the word rest has been used to indicate two alternative words. One meaning of the word rest is peace of mind, another meaning of the word is remaining. So within the context of this poem, both these words apply, because the Almighty God has in that poem tried to give everything, every blessing to human beings, and he has kept rest with him so that a balance between the creation and creatures is made. Another example of this pun is in the following sentence, which I read: when a woman loses her husband, she pines for a second. Why? The use of the word second can be judged in two different ways. First meaning of the word is a moment, for a particular moment, and another meaning of the word is the next, the second. Another. Why? Because the death of someone's husband is a matter of regret, so the loser regrets for a second, and when the loser reconciles herself to the situation, the loser regains normalcy of mind, normalcy of the states of mood. She wants, on practical grounds, another husband so that the life can be spent very smoothly. Dear students, we have to consciously use such words and understand wherever we find them. Another example of this figure of speech is hyperbole. It is in the use of the word that exaggerates an idea or a thing out of all proportions. For example, when Wordsworth sees in the sky uh, stars and other things like you can say that when he sees in the sky stars, he says 20,000 saw at a glance. Means he cannot see at the same time 20,000 stars or 20,000 other things available in the sky, but it is the state of the poet's mood. At seeing the beauty of the sky, he lives with joy and he says that I have seen 20,000s. Okay, and another example of this hyperbole has been used by uh, Hamlet for his beloved Ophelia, when he says that I loved Ophelia at 40,000 brothers with all their quantity of love cannot make up my sum. Just try to understand the intensity of the statement and the profundity of the love in the heart of the lover for his beloved Ophelia. He says that my amount of love that I love Ophelia cannot be compensated when 40,000 brother collect their love. It is a kind of hyperbolic expression. And you know that in Shakespeare's Macbeth, when the murder has been committed and the guilty is very much regretful that, oh, he has committed the murder, I have committed the murder. Macbeth has committed the murder of his guest King Duncan, and he feels guilty conscience, and he says that all the waters of the Arabia Sea cannot wash clean my hand. What does it mean? Because the blood in his hand is very scanty in amount. It can be washed clean just with the help of a mug of water, just with the help of a few liters of water, but such a vast amount of water cannot wash clean the physical blood that is stained on his hand. This is not the intention of the speaker. Rather, the depth of guilt is so very pervasive, so very profound, that not only the water is required to wash away this stain, because water can wash clean your physical stain, but how can it wash clean the pangs of sadness and the pangs of regret that are always available in your heart? So the use of such kinds of expressions, such kind of linguistic expressions, not only communicate the poet's moods, but also they communicates the deeper meanings of life, and they bring home the writer's views very clearly on the listeners or the audience's mind. When you study poetry, you should look at these things, and you should not be worried initially that I am unable to use it. No, you should begin with the small things. You should not go for the big things first. You should begin with simile, then metaphor, then oxymoron, then pathetic fallacy, then personification, etc., etc. Personification is also another figure of speech which consists in the use of inanimate objects as if they were animate objects. What happens that poets normally address objects of nature as if they were alive. When they use objects of nature as if they were alive, they were animate, it means that they are personifying. They are personifying. Milton in his Lycidas has also used personification, because he says in Lycidas, I pluck to come your berries harsh and crude. Okay? He is addressing a plant, and he addresses that the plant is immature, and I am coming to pluck your berries harsh and crude. Actually, he is not coming to pluck the berries of the tree cruelly. Rather, he is referring to his own immaturity of poetic quality. He has not felt in a position to pen down a poem, but the occasion is sad, so he says that I am coming to write poetry before my poetic maturity is over. I have to break my oath once again. So, plucking the berries is a kind of personification. And what is pathetic fallacy? Pathetic fallacy is something different from personification. You know that pathetic fallacy is that kind of figure of speech when you invest the objects of nature as if they behave like living beings and they participate in human sorrows and sufferings. If I say that all the objects of nature shed tears over the death of my beloved, over the death of my friend, okay, so then it means that the objects of nature are no longer a kind of natural objects, rather they share with the human sorrows and sufferings. So poets normally use so many things to communicate their ideas and expressions. The normal thing is that we do not generally notice that this figure of speech has been used in such a manner. I have already told you that poetry uses words. Everything is word, but within the context of poetry, the words have to be twisted, words have to be used very carefully so that the emotion of the poet can be expressed. Any word is not capable of expressing the poet's inner states of moods. Sometimes words have to be coined and they have to be used in a new way, because the use of the word sometimes exhausts its range, and the poets feel that it has been used for such a long time, and it has been used for such a long time and with such a number of contexts that what I want to say, this word does not bear that import. So their coinages work. Poets have the liberty of poetic license. Poets also have the liberty of coinages of new words. Those words may or may not exist in the dictionary. If they exist in the dictionary, that is fine, that is okay, that is good, that you can understand. And if they try to devise certain techniques or terms, it means that they have used it for the sake of their own poetic purpose. Much of the poets, many of the poets in the modern age, they have also tried their hand at the coinages of some terms to express their ideas and feelings. Another thing that occurs to me at this moment of time is paradox. Paradox is what? The word itself denotes that two things which are contradictory, they are called paradox. Means they do not sit together. For example, if I say that they were friends yet enemies, so this is a paradoxical statement. This is a paradoxical statement. It consists in the use of the two different expressions, two contradictory statements. Still, there is some kind of meaning in it. Without meaning, the writers cannot use it. So, paradox is a very essential aspect of poetry also. For example, if I say, the more you read, the less you learn. What does it mean? How can it be possible that the more you read, the less you learn? The more you desire, the less you get. This is actually a truth sometimes which poets want to express, and they use paradox. And some of the other figures which you may be say antithetical expressions and other things like that. But we will do well if we try to practice some of the figures of speech. Take the example of simile. You remember or memorize first the definition of simile, and try to bring to your mind some of the comparisons of the things that you see in the world. You compare one thing with another in your day-to-day life, and you should also use metaphor to compare. There are so many expressions that have been given in the books of figure of speech, the books that deal with the rhetorical devices and the prosodic devices, prosody and rhetoric. This is a very very good book for students of English literature. Yes, after reading those books, we should also try to utilize our own mind and understand how do poets use such kinds of things in their poetry. We are not poets, we are common human beings, but the purpose of studying literature is also to enhance our mind, develop our mind, to form and frame some of the expressions from our own side. We should not only spend time on the reading of books and memorizing the figures of speech, giving there. A time should come in your life when you are doing advanced studies of MA and PhD, that now you should be able to use figures of speech spontaneously and normally. So how can you use figures of speech normally? When you think clearly. I was reading a book and practical criticism book, and there I saw that critics have enumerated figures of speech one after another, that this is figure of speech, this is metaphor, this is metonymy, this is simile and metaphor. But after reading those figures of speech and memorizing also those definitions, I did not find myself comfortable in understanding what actually figures of speech are. We should try to use figures of speech on our own, from our own self. In practical criticism, I see that students, when they are given some poem for practical criticism, they only point out that here figure of speech personification has been used, here in this line hyperbole has been used, simile has been used, metaphor has been used. No, you have to underline that how the necessity of the emotion of the poet, the moment of the intensity of the poet has compelled him to spontaneously bring to his mind such and such figure of speech. Because poets do not deliberately use figures of speech. In course of thinking, the relevant figure of speech come to their mind. So ultimately, if we start thinking clearly, if we start watching the objects of nature, if we are trying to assimilate or assess our own moods, our own feelings, then we have a feeling that yes, now I can express my moods, and then a kind of figure emerges in your mind. So I advise you politely that use figures of speech normally. It should not be deliberately used. You cannot say that today I am going to write a poem, and in this poem I will use or incorporate all the figures of speech that I know. So this cannot be premeditated art. Poetry is not a premeditated art. As a romantic poet once said, it is not a premeditated art. But another romantic poet, Wordsworth, says, contradicts his own contemporary, that no, poetry is a spontaneous overflow of powerful feelings. It takes its origin from emotions recollected in tranquility. So, romanticism and classicism, they are two different moods of writing. They are two different things of writing. Romanticism favors subjectivity, classicism favors objectivity. So this is a style of writing, and it was also a movement in poetry also. But for common students like us, we have to try to use figures of speech slowly but surely. Dear students, when you take any poem, maybe The Gifts of God by George Herbert, or H.L.V. Deroziu's The Harp of India, even in the beginning you can locate some of the figures of speech. but do not deliberately try to point out. Poets do not deliberately point out figures of speech. They point out when it is necessary. And language is beauty. The more we use language, the more the area of language expands. It is a dynamic thing. Language is not a static thing, it is a dynamic thing. And the more you try to use language, the faster the area of the language becomes. It doesn't die. Language doesn't die. Its area is widening all the time. That is why it has been called that a man is born with the faculty of language, and language is a dynamic thing. It has a dynamic quality. It does not stop anywhere. It has the qualities to beget one after another. And in this quality of begetting the language, in this quality of progressing the language, poets help a lot. And poets of the succeeding generations, they keep writing and they keep expanding the horizons of thought, and that is why no amount of labor is required to exhaust the meaning of a poem. The meaning of a poem cannot be exhausted by howsoever we may explain it. With every succeeding generation, with every passing generation, the critics or the readers will apply their own critical tools, will apply their own critical minds, and they will find out different shades and nuances of meanings. And the use of figure of speech, which was employed 200 years ago, 300 years ago, that may mean differently from the one in the present context. So, everything is expanding, disciplines are expanding, critical inquiries are expanding. We had limited critical inquiries some 400 years back, some 500 years back, but today, every passing day, we see that a new critical mode of inquiry emerges, and we don't know how many more modes of critical inquiries will keep increasing in times to come. We have to keep our minds, eyes, and ears open, and we have to let noble thoughts come from every quarter. We should not think that we have learned too much, we don't need to understand now. No, learning is a very, very essential thing of life, and we should think that we are born to learn every day. There is no point where you feel perfect or your perfection can be achieved. Every second moment we learn and we discover our own faults. So, learning should be taken with modesty, learning should be taken with politeness, and it should be taken in the spirits of sincerity and honesty. Dear students, I always feel talking to you very, very qualitatively, but this is not a classroom teaching. This is just a kind of engagement from my home, and whatever I feel or find, every now and then I try to share with you. The very fact that today I was reading a poem, and it just triggered my opinion, it just triggered my ideas about figures of speech, that how poets are very much adept in using figures of speech. So I just try to remind you of those figures of speech, those common figures of speech, and I wish that when you end watching this video, you go back to your book and try to refresh your memory of the figures of speech. I am sure that you will enjoy it, and you will enjoy not only the figures of speech, you will also enjoy the definitions and the different examples that have been given at the end of each and every figure of speech. I don't have much to say on this topic, and I think that This is now time to take my modest leave of you, but then I wish you a happy and healthy life ahead. This is a very, very difficult situation for all of us, and we have to keep our spirits on. So I take leave of you. You take care of yourself, stay safe, stay at home, make the most of the time. Thank you very much. Bye bye.